Hello, and welcome to the webinar, Is Your Microsoft 365 Data Recoverable? My name is Eric Wallace with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have a few administrative details to share with you, and then I'll turn things over to our esteemed speakers. First, we'd like to thank Rubrik for their partnership with today's event. They've been wonderful partners to Argyle, and they're committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. Thank you again to Rubrik. We appreciate you joining us today. We welcome you to stay connected during today's event. For those of you who are active tweeters, please follow us on Twitter at Argyle Exec Forum, and be sure to follow Argyle on LinkedIn for special announcements. I also want to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we've curated based on the feedback we've received over the years from our members. We've worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during the session today, and we appreciate our members' support of this policy. Finally, and most importantly, we want to hear from you, so please submit all questions that come up during today's event into the chat section of the interface. Following the discussion, we've set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on your questions. Without further delay, let's begin our presentation. Welcome, Kim and Drew. Over to you.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. Yes, I am Kim Lambert, here from Rubrik, one of the industry's leading data security companies. So I partner with our technical solutions and product teams at Rubrik, as well as product and tech strategists at Microsoft that focus on security and modern workplace challenges. So I have here with me today Drew Russell, and I'm very lucky to have him. Drew is our technical guru for Microsoft 365. He's been on hundreds of customer calls with Microsoft customers, so he knows what you're dealing with in terms of today's cybersecurity threats. And Drew's on the line here to show you a quick demo of the solution, so you will not leave here today without seeing the product in action, I promise. All right, so for the agenda, we're going to cover why do you need to protect Microsoft 365 in the first place. We'll get into that, and we'll cover the current threat landscape for Microsoft 365. We'll then get into what needs to happen for you to be cyber resilient, and I'll explain how Rubrik Protection complements the native Microsoft 365 toolset, which you already have, working together with Microsoft as a strategic partner with you in mind to help you ensure that you can recover your data when you need it. All right, let's jump right in. So what's going on in terms of the threat landscape for Microsoft 365? Well, here's the situation as we see it, talking to other organizations, security experts, and Microsoft. Microsoft 365 is a tier 1 business critical application, just like the other SaaS apps you use to run your business. Without your 365 data, Mailbox, SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, your users are down. They're unproductive. And if you're in IT, guess what? You're the one then left scrambling if it's down. So unfortunately, targeted threat groups now know also how important this data is, and they're investing a lot of time, a lot of money into understanding how to launch successful ransomware attacks, different types of cyber attacks against it, and they're maliciously trying to delete files. So the threat is real. We've seen data that says 71% of Microsoft 365 users have experienced an account takeover. That's a stat not on this slide. 85% of users have experienced an email breach as well. So there are brand new threats and vulnerabilities that are being discovered monthly. And these are just a handful of articles over the past year or so. And this proves that hackers continue to get even more creative. They're leveraging session cookies to bypass multi-factor authentication. They're exploiting what once was a technical differentiator for Microsoft 365 to now being used to hold cloud files hostage. Phishing campaigns are evolving. They're cumulative based on hackers getting more advanced each and every month. Now, what's interesting is even the US government, CISA, they're warning Microsoft 365 users about targeted attacks, and they're issuing announcements and alerts via the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency website. So you know it's serious, right? They're getting in using legitimate global admin credentials, and they're exfiltrating data, sensitive internal data, customer data within Exchange, and other 365 applications. So it's clear that despite investments in infrastructure security tools, cyber criminals are still getting through to your data, and even your data backups. And when they take your data down, especially your Microsoft 365 data, they can take down your entire business. So this leads us to a couple fundamental questions, right? So number one, would you be prepared to recover your Microsoft 365 data if you were hit by ransomware? And two, are you in a position to recover from data loss when data is targeted by a rogue user or even just accidentally deleted, which 80% of Microsoft 365 users have actually experienced? In many cases, probably not. Because although Microsoft is responsible for keeping its cloud functional, according to, of course, the shared responsibility model, its subscribers, that's you, are responsible for protecting the data that you create within Microsoft 365. So on the left is an actual screenshot from Microsoft's best practices online documentation. It's in an article called How to Recover from a Ransomware Attack. And the very first step in this documented process is for customers to verify your backups. And then they call out specifically how it should be your offline backups. So the screenshot on the right is the Microsoft Services Agreement itself. So that's important because they're specifically recommending backing up your data using a third-party backup service. So when it comes to your enterprise today, it's all around adding multiple layers of protection to your overall threat response. So perimeter security, network security, endpoint security, and application security. But of course, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when these layers are going to be breached. So no matter how much you've invested in them, they're certainly very important, but guess what? It still happens. So when you think about the SaaS space in general, those layers that are part of the traditional defense and depth strategy are managed by your SaaS-based platform vendors. And it's part of why you make the switch to SaaS in the first place, right? Where the provider is taking ownership of those security layers. But this can make your life easier from a security perspective and put security out of your purview. But keep in mind that those layers for enterprise security are different for SaaS. So for the SaaS-based world, those layers become identity and authentication layers. And the main entry point into the SaaS-based world is your user credentials and user logins, what threat groups actually use to gain access. For Microsoft 365, you also have, of course, the Microsoft native tool set. And they do follow some important concepts of zero trust data security. So trust no one, assume compromise for protection. But for Microsoft, it's broken up into 4 categories that are all really about complying with legal and regulatory standards. And this is from the Microsoft documentation as well. So first they say, know your data and the different levels of protection needed. Understand your data landscape, identify important data across your hybrid environment. Then protect it to make sure that it's fully encrypted, restrict access, apply those encryption and access restrictions and visual markings. Prevent data loss, so that includes oversharing of sensitive data. So you want to detect risky behavior that you wouldn't expect to see. And then finally, govern your data. So retain what you need, delete what you don't. Because if the data is not in your environment, it can't be compromised. So in that regard, you want to automatically retain, delete, and store data and records for compliance as needed. And this is all well and good. But let's bring to life an actual ransomware attack, this type of scenario to life. Let's bring it to life to show you an example of how this would play out, even with these world-class Microsoft security tools that you rely on. So the way we see breaches is typically through compromise of admin credentials. And there are a lot of different ways that this can happen. So once an attacker has the global admin credentials, they essentially have the keys to do almost anything. And what they'll typically do is they'll start by exporting data to their command and control servers, then delete some or all of your data, often by manipulating those retention policies that you have in place to delete your data. And then they drop the ransom note. Okay, so what do you do next? Do you restore from retention? Well, keep in mind the retention policies may have been manipulated to delete the data in the first place, because hackers can utilize the delete functionality of retention policies to remove all data from the environment automatically. Now, when that happens, there may not actually be even anything left to recover. And the issue in Microsoft 365 can be how complex it is to understand how to recover the data. So, for example, Exchange Online in particular requires some considerable skill and support when you're restoring deleted items. Now, if you have some data on litigation hold, that may be something you're thinking you could do. You could try to possibly restore it from that, but it's not straightforward. This could take days. It's really not a viable backup strategy, and there's no guarantee of recovery if you've been attacked. So then you're stuck negotiating or paying a ransom. And we're noticing that potentially other cloud accounts as well as data centers are breached as well. So if you think about Microsoft 365's tools as part of your defense in depth strategy, you have identity and authentication layers. Yes, you have that. But those identity and authentication layers can be breached. So if that happens, where does that leave you? Well, Microsoft recognizes this, and that's why they took an equity stake in Rubrik. They see us as a leader in data security that they want to partner with. We work very closely with them as a strategic partner. So a tight technology and development interlock at the engineering, at the product levels is really key to how quickly Microsoft customers can benefit from Rubrik's security innovations and how effective the data protection is based on our deep integrations with Microsoft products and shared security insights. So this partnership works so well because we have a joint zero trust approach to data resilience that integrates with native Microsoft security and access features. Because at Rubrik, we know that achieving the promise of zero trust security, it clearly requires more than just traditional infrastructure security methodologies. It requires data security that restores data combined with infrastructure security to help you fully secure your data assets. And then, of course, secure your business so you're able to defend it against cyber attacks. And to do that, Rubrik takes a three-pronged approach. Data resilience, so cyber-proofing your backup data from insider threats and ransomware with air-gapped, immutable, access-controlled backups. Data observability, so continuously monitoring that data for ransomware, pinpointing and managing sensitive data exposure in an attack scenario, and hunting for indicators of compromise. And then data remediation, both surgical data recovery and mass or granular recovery to rapidly restore your apps in the enterprise, your files, your objects, while at the same time looking to avoid malware reinfection that can be a risk when you're restoring from a compromised backup of your data. And this all happens within SaaS-based Rubrik Security Cloud. And with Rubrik Security Cloud, you can keep your data secure, you can monitor risk, and you can quickly recover it wherever it lives across enterprise, cloud, and SaaS like Microsoft 365. Because while Microsoft offers tools to help you control access, to keep attackers out, the compliance tools, again, to help you schedule deletion so you don't keep data longer than you need to, the classification and search tools to help you comply with certain regulations and e-discovery. But for recovery from ransomware or accidental deletion or long-term retention for everyday instances where you need to, say, recover 60, 90-day-old Microsoft 365 data that's been lost and that you can't recover with the recycle bin or based on versioning, that's where Rubrik comes in with something that's consistent across the board for all Microsoft 365 applications that we protect. And with Rubrik for Microsoft 365, you have that isolated copy of your data in Azure, but physically separated from your Microsoft 365 data. And you can recover in bulk. You can use a granular three-step recovery. You can easily locate data with real-time predictive global search. And Rubrik is eliminating the manual job scheduling. We're streamlining policy management across tens of thousands of users. So when you have new users added, they're automatically protected by our SLA policies. And Rubrik auto-scales resources so that we can really seamlessly operate and protect your large environments. And with Rubrik, the ability to manage everything is through this SaaS-based Rubrik Security Cloud that lets you protect on-prem data, hybrid cloud, and all of your cloud applications that Rubrik protects as well. So we do this with this logical secure air gap between your core data and your backup data so that your data is protected by Rubrik and it's recoverable when you need it. Now, with Rubrik in the equation, in that same ransomware scenario, let's go back to that. Your data is now inaccessible through your Microsoft 365 admin account. So if there is a case of accidental or malicious deletion or corruption, the recovery process is simple. And we'd love to show you a full demo of this that goes into a lot of detail, but Drew will show you something very soon. But it's as simple as going to your calendar backup, selecting a restore point, clicking restore. That's simple. But our story is never complete without having some proof points to back it up. So don't just take it from me. We have customers across a variety of industries, so finance, healthcare, retail, everything, who are relying on this protection from Rubrik to protect their data and not have to pay the ransom if their Microsoft 365 or data across their other environments is attacked. So these are a couple of customer use cases, some stories I can share with you before we hop into Drew's quick demo. City National Bank of Florida. This is a financial institution based in Miami. They're the second largest financial institution in the state. For them, security is at the forefront of everything they do. So it's critical that they partner with robust security organizations like Rubrik and Microsoft to advance their security posture. And they do that with our natively immutable, air-gapped, access-controlled backups and our ransomware remediation. So with the rising threat of ransomware for financial services, right, and the fact that having to manage Microsoft 365 protection can often be a very siloed task, especially if you're using an on-prem solution and it's not connected to the protection for your data centers as well, for your hybrid cloud workloads. For them, Rubrik was very much key in this regard. So they were able to really quickly and easily implement Rubrik Microsoft 365 data security to over 1,000 users at scale, to integrate with Azure Stack and have a uniform scalable solution to help ensure their data is recoverable and it's available for their BCDR, their business continuity and disaster recovery efforts 24/7. Another one, J.E. Dunn. This is the story of how Rubrik has brought them peace of mind. And while Microsoft Exchange Online natively gives them the ability to configure retention policies, they didn't consider this approach for data protection because of the design of retention policies. There are scenarios in which they wouldn't be able to recover emails with the native tools. So they didn't feel that litigation hold provided their business with the true data protection for emails. And that's where Rubrik came in. The test for J.E. Dunn came when they found themselves in a situation where an email inbox was hard deleted. And with Rubrik, they were able to quickly restore the 20 gig inbox and keep related project operations on schedule. So this was a big win for them because they avoided unnecessary downtime and risk to their projects. So a couple of things they experienced with Rubrik for Microsoft 365 is, of course, fast setup. Only took them 5 minutes to build and apply the SLAs. They took total control of their data, of where their data is stored, since they were able to keep their data in Azure and physically separated. Lots of save time. So they used to have to check if an email is older than 30 days if they wanted to recover that email. But now they can just skip that step with Rubrik. They can go straight to recovery. Last example. The University of the Pacific. This university is protecting Microsoft 365 with Rubrik, and while they didn't have to deal with a disaster scenario, they were working with a larger audience and need just as much protection. So with Rubrik, the team here feels confident that their mailboxes are protected. Once again, lightning fast setup. It was a snap to set up their integration and instantly protect 4,000 accounts with one SLA. They had 50% plus faster inbox restores, so they can recover a complete inbox in little more than an hour, something that previously would have taken them a few hours, since they would have needed to restore a complete volume to recover a mailbox. So what was previously a cumbersome, time-consuming process has now really been completely simplified with Rubrik's ability to perform granular 365 restores. They're now able to restore users' email in minutes, and that's something that previously took much, much longer to recover. So in all these cases, it's something where Rubrik is something that they can rely on to recover their data when they need it. They have that cyber recovery in place when they need that as well. So how does this protection that allows for fast mass enterprise scale recovery work anyway? This is a question people want to know. Okay, how does it work? First, how do we connect to Microsoft 365? Rubrik runs a SaaS control plane. So when we protect your data, all we do is connect via API directly to your subscription in Azure. And we do a one-time authentication, so we never store your credentials. Once we make that OAuth connection, we start to deploy enterprise apps, and that allows us to read a bunch of data to push it back through. And when Rubrik takes the backups, the data is moved out of your tenant altogether and stored in a Rubrik hosted tenant in Azure. Now, this allows us to create a resiliency layer, an air gap. Because again, the only thing that interacts with your data is Rubrik's application. And if an attacker gets in and gains those global admin permissions, they can't access the backup data. So it's actually stored in physically separate data centers managed by a separate application. All the data is encrypted. On the back end, Rubrik's providing all the storage, and you're consuming this as a service. So it's paid per user per year, and we provide all the storage needed from an Azure perspective. So that's the piece around the architecture. Now, how do we achieve the reliability? So Microsoft APIs, they can be tricky to work with. So how do we optimize that? From a management standpoint, Rubrik manages everything through our SLA policy engine, an SLA domain. You just set the RPO, the RTO, you tell Rubrik how often to back up. You set the retention, you assign the SLA domain to M365 resources that you want to protect. On the back end, we're really reliable because we integrate with both the app-specific APIs in M365 as well as this overarching graph API. So by using multiple APIs, that's helping us ensure that we can handle failures as they occur. Because if you're familiar with Microsoft, you know that the failures can happen. And so look on the right here, this is showing how often these APIs can fail because so many people are accessing the application. So to combat this, at Rubrik, we've optimized the workflow so that if you're taking a OneDrive backup, for instance, and that API is unavailable, we can fail back to Graph and vice versa. So this really allows us to be extremely reliable to help you ensure you get a good baseline backup and that the tool is actively backing up data and remains at 100% compliance. So that's the first piece, is the API and handling failure. The next big constraint in Microsoft's ecosystem can be the throttling. So when you push back large amounts of data from Microsoft, you're throttled. Why? They have hundreds of millions of users accessing the platform, and they have to guarantee performance. And where this comes into effect is when you're trying to recover lots of users at once, right? And you may need to do that. We've seen it happen. And what we've done is built an auto-scaling infrastructure that allows us to handle many backup streams at once. So we can load balance and we can spread the throttling across many enterprise apps and resources. And this allows us in a recovery to deploy many enterprise apps, hundreds, even thousands at a time, to ensure optimal performance. And it's all about how many jobs we can run at once. So think of it this way. Say you're filling up a swimming pool with a garden hose. There's only so much water that you can push through a single hose. And what our architecture allows us to do is to run 1,000 garden hoses at a time so that you can really achieve optimal performance. And what this equates to in the real world is being able to restore lots and lots of data all at once. So in our scale testing, we can recover quickly with more jobs in parallel. You're looking here at about 835 emails a second as an example. And what this equates to is being able to recover about 20,000 users a day from Exchange, and we're improving that all the time. One of Rubrik's biggest technical differentiators is being extremely performant via our architecture with how we deal with Microsoft's APIs and how we work with the throttling. All right, this is what you've been waiting for. Let's hop over to Drew's demo. He's going to give you a quick 3-minute overview of the Rubrik solution. I think it'll be easy for you to see just how simple it is to use, because the overall goal here is to have anybody be able to use it in a pinch, because in an attack, Folks who maybe never logged into Rubrik before are going to have some of the responsibilities perhaps to restore their environment in a worst case scenario. So Drew, you're already fired up. You're in the Rubrik platform. Show us what this looks like.
So we landed by default here on their dashboard dedicated to 365. The very simple goal of this is to provide you a high-level overview of what's happening at any given time. That way you can say, are my backups working as I'd expect? If you tell Rubrik to take a backup every 12 hours, every 4 hours, every day, how do we highlight that information first foremost in the dashboard here? The other kind of part of the demo that's always really important here is obviously how do you restore. So in this case, I'll switch over to my OneDrive to kind of walk you through that workflow. The really important aspect here is, even though I'm talking about OneDrive, the UI is going to be identical to not only everything in the 365 space, whether it's Exchange, Teams, both chat and file data, or things around SharePoint sites. It's going to be almost identical, just slightly tweaked based off of the individual metadata for those different data sources. So we always have the status view. We're always going to have this calendar view, which provides you those point-in-time recovery options. So every green check mark here represents some kind of snapshot that happened on that day. So maybe I want to go back to last week as a quick example here. What I'll do is pick the specific point in time. So in this case, we're taking a daily backup. So I'll select that for recovery. And then from there, you tell Rubrik 2 pieces of information: what data to restore and where to bring that back to. So we can always do the restore at the top level. So think of it as restoring the entire OneDrive, or start getting as granular as we need to here, whether it is multi-selecting various folders or getting down to an individual file for restore as well. Once you have the file selected you want to bring back to the environment, like I said, the next step is to tell Rubrik where to bring that data back to. So we can restore it back to the original location, which is our default choice. So bring it back to my OneDrive. We can select any other user in the ecosystem to restore to, or we also have this download from cloud option where we'll zip up all the files and give you the ability to download it basically through the browser here. Just to keep my my demo environment look clean, I'll select another user to kick off that restore job, do a final confirmation that this is what I want to recover. And then what you see down here in the bottom left is a quick info alert saying, hey, we started the restore job. Why I like to highlight this, it's kind of a good visual indicator of what's happening behind the covers. So like we mentioned, we use the Azure Kubernetes service. So we just set up a net new container that's going to interact with a dedicated enterprise application. That way we're not conflicting with any other kind of restore jobs we're doing early, any backup jobs we're doing from a throttling perspective. And this is how we're able to scale the solution and meet the demands of our large environments. We're having customers come to us and saying, hey, I have 7, 8, 9 petabytes of data in my ecosystem. How do I bring that data back as quickly as possible? And that's fundamentally what we're trying to do as part of an organization here. And obviously doing that directly in line with our colleagues on the Microsoft side. Last but not least, I'll switch over to the events tab just to kind of show you that you can monitor the progress of these jobs. So in this case, we can see the OneDrive job that I just kicked off just took a couple seconds to bring that data back into the ecosystem.
Yep, and it's as easy as that. So thanks, Drew, for that quick demo. Drew does a lot of these, and we try to keep it short and sweet here, but frankly, this covers probably 80% of what Drew shows to customers on a daily basis. And the team here at Rubrik will be happy to do a deeper dive with anyone here on the call. We can dive into our data observability features for Microsoft 365. There's lots of other things to see, but overall, Rubrik's UI is built for the network operator, the security ops person, generalist, to protect data. And we make this available through all sorts of constructs so that it's easy to protect your data, whether you're protecting SaaS, IaaS, enterprise apps in a data center. So regardless of what you're protecting, the workflow is basically identical. So just remember that. We've simplified this process. It's really easy to run reporting in governments. If you have folks that want to deploy as code or build as cloud architects in a DevOps fashion, everything in Rubrik consumes its own API. So everything's built on a REST API. We can automate with pretty much any third-party tool out there like Terraform, Splunk, Puppet, Chef, ServiceNow. So keep that in mind as well. So thanks everyone for coming along with us on this tour of Rubrik for Microsoft 365. Now you know that Rubrik 360 or that Microsoft 365 data absolutely needs to be protected. So beyond the native Microsoft tools, and we work closely with Microsoft engineers to provide the ultimate security, with our close partnership, our collaboration with Microsoft. So that way your data is secure, whether it's inadvertent deletion, whether it's a malicious threat actor situation, and your Microsoft 365 and your other organizational data can be resilient. You can have control, you can have visibility of that data, and you can be prepared for the inevitable attack, whether it's on-prem, in the cloud, or in SaaS. So to learn more about all things Rubrik and Microsoft, please do check out our content available from the Rubrik Forward Conference. You can go to Rubrik.com to register to view content. You can access the material on demand at any time. All right, Q&A. What if you want to protect your Office 365 on-prem? This is a good one to start out with. So we get this question a lot. And it can be common for other vendors to still adopt an on-prem mindset. And it's good to talk about why they do this. Because one of the biggest advantages for an on-prem architecture is this perceived simplicity of installing it and the everyday management. Now, in our experience, we have found it surprisingly easy to install this kind of protection utilizing a standard on-prem deployment. Microsoft 365 is just treated like any other data source to be configured. But here's what's interesting. After that, there starts to be other issues to think about, really scaling. So load balancing, things we talked about when we went over more of the details on how it works, right? Plus, what does the upgrade process look like? Think about that. How do you get the latest patches for security? All that stuff is handled by Rubrik because it operates as a hosted solution in Azure. So we can not only make installation and management easy, but also utilize the Azure Kubernetes service to scale automatically. So it's something where you really do want a SaaS-based solution, but it's something that's kind of become ingrained in people's minds that there's this perceived simplicity, right, with on-prem. What if I don't want Rubrik to host the data? Yeah, we get this question. So obviously your data, your employees, it's your most important asset. And when you look across your entire landscape, you're consuming a lot of SaaS-based services probably, where you do have software companies owning and controlling your data. And it's the same concept of why do you put your money in a bank versus under your mattress, right? So you put it in a bank because it can be safer there. Sure, Rubrik hosts your data, but our tenant is within Azure, not Rubrik data centers. Plus, Rubrik is a data security company. We do a world-class job of securing your business data. There's several measures we take even outside the baseline Azure security where you're already putting your Microsoft 365 data. Rubrik's own tenant is in Azure, so you get that baseline security. And beyond that, we follow the highest level protocols, security controls. So you have things like Rubrik security engineers monitoring your environment 24/7, SOC 2 compliance. And we really take security off your plate. So your data is not mingled with any other customer data. It's stored on dedicated managed disks for you. All your data is encrypted at rest and in flight. And you saw a few of those examples earlier, but thousands of customers and very regulated industries have already highly vetted our platform. They're protecting thousands and thousands of users. So if you have deep security questions about that, I do encourage you to check out our Microsoft 365 security architecture white paper. I think that's a great resource and that should answer a lot of baseline questions. But of course, additionally, at some point, our team can always have a call with you and your customer trust staff, and we can go into much more detail on the platform controls on the back end. Can you explain the immutability feature? Yeah, sure. It's an important concept to know. So immutability, that's where the state is set. It's inflexible once it's constructed. So it means the data can't be changed. It's immutable. When the Rubrik founders first constructed Rubrik, they created a file system for this one thing, this purpose-built file system, versus using a general file system. And they did that so that we can do this one core function and do it well, right? Backup, that's where we came from, right? And where the magic comes in is data managed by Rubrik is never available in a read and write state to any client. And this is true even during a data restore. So since data can't be overwritten, even infected data ingested by the Rubrik system cannot infect other existing files or folders. So the data can't be changed by malicious action. We're able to protect the integrity of your data and give you the confidence that the backup data you need is there when you need it. And we have all of these extra security tools integrated with it to go beyond backup for full cyber recovery. What is the difference between data security and cyber security? Lots of security terms thrown around. I get it. So let's put it this way. You invest a lot of money in everything from endpoint to network and database security, your infrastructure security, and it's part of your holistic approach to cybersecurity. But even with everything you're already doing in that regard, it doesn't guarantee you won't be attacked. Security at the end of the day is about risk mitigation. It's not risk avoidance. And when it comes to data security, while you have invested in prevention and detection and investigation of cyber attacks, have you invested in making sure your data is backed up and safe from attack when that does happen? Can you look at your backup data to see if you've been infected? Can you recover your data quickly? So this is what data security is about, data security. Don't we pay Microsoft to protect the data? So Microsoft is absolutely offering you security, and just like any other strategy you employ, you're protecting the perimeter with them. You're putting thick access barriers around who could reach your environment. And when you look at the tools Microsoft gives you, even within like E5, right? They're designed to give you an understanding of where your data lives across your application landscape, or to provide perimeter defense, like with Microsoft Defender and advanced telemetry tools to keep the bad actors out. But Microsoft does not back your data up. They give you governance and compliance tools to mitigate risk, to give you some level of operational recovery. The challenge is the way these attacks are going down nowadays. An attacker gets in the environment through phishing, VPN access. They steal those global admin credentials. And when they get in, right, we talked about this one, they're trying to delete or exfiltrate data. So for that, Microsoft does not have a recovery story. They don't have a guaranteed SLA. Their SLAs are around performance and availability of data versus an RTO, a recovery time objective to recover the data. So as part of any ransomware strategy, that's why Microsoft actually recommends in their materials that you have third-party backup. So you need to protect yourself. Even in the remote chance an attacker gets in, you don't want it to decimate your business. No one in the market's going to tell you, including Microsoft, that you're 100% protected from ransomware. So that's where Rubrik comes in to bridge that gap.
Thank you, Kim and Drew, for that insightful session. This concludes today's webinar, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this fantastic virtual event. And thank you again to our partner, Rubrik, and enjoy the rest of your day.